we need to do this weekend is to start first realizing that it's only through the grace of God that we can raise children that keep the faith all their lives. The statistics are prohibitive, very bad. As you will see in the DVD here, 70% of the children of Americans who are Christians who go to church every week, 70% of their kids, when they grow up and become independent, they leave the church. 90% Abuna Biul in New York.
The Orthodox.
On the Orthodox? And the Greeks? Okay. No, I have more statistics. I will give it to you as soon as I find it from Ferial, because she has it on her phone, but I don't know how to get it. There is a survey actually was done, and I'm not supposed to tell you what city, but it's in the land of immigration in the Western world. It's a large city, and the survey was done, and 270 families actually youth responded. 270 youth responded. These are Coptic Christians. And the survey was done very well. 17 out of the 270 said they don't care about the church, they don't go. And the survey was looking for the high-risk activities of the youth. 3 areas mainly: being drunk, in other words, not just alcohol, getting drunk, doing drugs, and the third thing is having sex or regular sex outside marriage. And the results were stunning. 17 that don't go to church at all, the 17 of them are involved in the 3 risky activities. There are a second group that is, they identify that they go to church about once every 3 months. These were about maybe 70 of them or something like that. And these people probably, I don't have she has it on her phone, Ferial, but she's not getting it to me. And it doesn't look like she's going to give it to me now. So I'll say it later on. But this, at least out of those, about half of them are involved in these risky activities. And then the rest, they go to church at least once a month. In other words, they're more or less regular every 2 weeks, every week. And there are something like 50 people out of these are involved in all these risky activities. That's about the Coptic youth. Now, these are not really what we're here for. These are the risky activities that we don't want to even talk about. But I'm trying to tell you that wearing a tunia and becoming a deacon and coming and going to church is not the measure of how spiritual or how faithful or how much relationship the kid has with the Lord Jesus Christ. And unless we ask the Lord to teach us the way we can deal with our children in the land of immigration, in a spiritual way and be good role models for them in that regard and not show them hypocrisy, the results will be the same for now and for tomorrow. So I think all the people I see here are very dedicated Christian people. And I think that sitting down and listening to a retreat where our main source in the movies here or the DVD is a course that actually focus on the family is making, and the title is exactly the title of this retreat, and that is Raising Kids with Faith That Lasts. And you will see the definition. And we will start actually by asking you, the audience, questions before we start anything, just like a pre-test. And we want your involvement, please, because we're not coming here to instruct. We're coming to learn from each other. Abuna, you start. You have the questions, right?
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, so I
thanks.
don't need-
No, that's all right. Yeah. So just to set kind of the pace for the weekend, we thought we'd open with a panel where we throw out questions and we invite you to ask questions. And we just do the best we can to answer them. And then tomorrow we'll have 2 talks, and then we'll close with a 4th talk and a sermon. And tomorrow's 2 talks will be entitled Raising Our Children Like God Raises Us and Family Faith Plan. And with this particular panel, we just want to start getting kind of the ball rolling. The first question that we wanted to throw out was, who do you consider the most trusted person to train your children spiritually or to raise up your children spiritually? What do you all think? You. That's right. That's right. And Jimmy said the same thing. Some of them are not. Try this one. Try that one. There you go. Oh. This one's working.
Okay. That work. Let us give you choices. The question is train spiritually. Is it the Abuna? Is it the Sunday school teacher? Is it a servant in the church or some elder? Or is it the school, of course? Now, please answer. Talk with us.
So
Should I
Hillary,
go around
yeah,
with the microphone?
Hillary and Jimmy.
Hillary said me, the mother.
Hillary answered.
Yeah, I know.
And Jimmy also had an answer.
Jimmy, huh?
Okay,
I know that the parent here is the Abuna. So that solves the problem. But none of us are parents and Abunas except for Abuna James. You see? Yes, Maggie. The grandparents. Very good.
All right, so why would we ask such an obvious question? What's the implication? Think about our church. Think about the culture in which we were raised. Any thoughts?
We rely on Sunday school a lot to do it.
Can you think a little bit outside this room? Let's talk about our community and see who is actually responsible for training spiritually our children. Not about, we're talking not about Hillary or Abuna. We're talking about our community because we're supposed to also be leaders within our community. Who is actually now considered responsible for the training spiritually of our kids?
Okay, during the baptism of the kids, we raise our hands and we make an oath that parents will be the ones. Thank you. Okay, during the baptism of our kids, both parents have raised their hands in front of God and we make like an oath that will be responsible. In addition, during the Synaxarium reading, I always hear if there is a story of saint, it says, and his parents raised him or raised her.
Great.
So what do you think about the responsibility of the priest?
For these questions, I think it is not just, I cannot point it, just one. It's everybody surrounding the kids have some influence on it.
Everybody around the kids?
Yeah, the parents, the grandparents.
Talking about who's the main one?
The main one,
Spiritual.
spiritually, I guess, in my opinion, it's the parents and the church.
No, I want one.
One, the church.
The church.
No.
Yeah.
Okay. One said the parent, one said the church. Okay, okay. If you have to choose number one, where do you choose?
Monica has her hand. Monica.
Huh?
Monica has her hand.
The parents are the church. Okay? Well, at least we got two ideas, the parents and the church. How about, what Abuna says, what the church means?
The church can mean Abuna. The church can mean the Sunday school teacher. All the.
That's what I said. It's the church, under the umbrella of the church, including Abuna, including Sunday school.
I don't know. I just feel that that diffuses a lot of the responsibility because the easiest thing we always say is, well, the kid was in the church, so.
Because Abuna, when you ask the question, there is no black and white. It's just there is a space. I cannot just go black and white. You just pointed just one person, which is you know, if it can be one.
Well, let me ask this. It's kind of a personal question, I guess. To be more specific, whom do you personally trust to raise your children spiritually? How about that? It's a little bit more narrow.
That would be me.
Hillary's like, yeah, I already answered the question. Next.
He said me, and after he said the church, he says me.
Okay.
Then when you change the question, change the
Answer.
The idea, you need to look at it.
Yeah.
Just,
Yeah.
When you trust, then you cannot trust just more the parents.
Right. Okay, so if you, is it safe to say that most of us are in agreement, or is there anybody who disagrees that parents typically, more likely than not, will consider themselves to be the most trusted to raise their children spiritually? Agree generally? Anybody disagree?
I don't know if all parents feel that way. I mean, maybe the majority of us in this room might feel that way.
And that's so okay. So there may why do you suspect some may disagree?
Because in our big church community, I don't know the parents well enough, but you get the sense that there are some parents that feel like they can rely on their church to provide.
They can drop their kid off,
Yeah.
right? Have them be there for the.
Sunday school will take care of them.
So we're getting now to some of the actual facts. Yes.
Let's be honest. Part of that reason, I would think, is as a parent, sometimes nobody knows themselves more than the person, right? So you know how inadequate you are, you know your own faults, and maybe sometimes you don't see yourself being able to raise your kids to the spiritual standard that you walk in on a Sunday morning and find Abuna giving a big lofty sermon talking about how holy we should all be, and then the parent thinks, well, I can't really do that, so yes, my child needs to be raised by a seasoned spiritual mentor or Sunday school teacher or whatever. I think that could be part of it.
Yeah, it's very true.
Well, this is very true. There's actually more what happens than what the reality in this room. Maybe we are actually more responsible people as parents. But what Abuna says is actually what happens in a community of believers, not necessarily just Coptic Orthodox Church.
Very true.
Well, and Maggie said the grandparents, and I'm wondering, when you said that, my thought process was sort of along those lines, that like I'm in the trenches with my kids and I'm getting messed up all the time from the mistakes that I make, and sometimes I feel like maybe, you know, a spiritually mature grandparent isn't burdened by all the frustrations of the daily life, and they can sometimes impart a wiser word on my kids than I might be able to. I don't know if that's what you meant when you said that, or if you were... Yeah.
But I think the other part of it is, you know, we're the primary teachers for so much more than just the spiritual.
Yeah.
That sometimes by the time it gets to the spiritual, it may even seem hypocritical, like you're saying, Debbie, because we just finished doing something that we told them they shouldn't do. Or,
Right.
or whatever, you know, or, but yeah, absolutely. I do think that the grandparents are more spiritually mature. They seem more calm than we are. They've experienced more in life. And, yeah, so, you know, for sure that's part of it. But I mean, I think even, I don't know if everyone is experiencing this or this was just me personally, but I feel like when I was growing up, I didn't ask as many questions as my kids seem to be asking of me. So even though I may feel like maybe I'm more spiritually mature or whatever, I don't know how to explain it to them. So I accepted many of the things that I believe in today because I just did. You know, and I don't know how to explain it to somebody, but I find that sometimes the Sunday school teachers do, or you find a nice word in the sermon that helps you explain it. So I definitely think the church augments and helps, for sure.
I like the word, the church augmented, reinforced what the house does, because I think that's what Abuna is coming to.
Father James made a comment earlier that he thought that some people might feel that Sunday school raises or is responsible or is most trusted. Right, Father James? Do you want to elaborate on that thought?
Yeah, it's along the same lines as what Abuna Theodore said. I mean, and just witnessing it pre-priesthood. I just made a small joke a little here, but I mean, I really witnessed people, you know, parents would come, you know, whatever, the Saturday nights would drop off the kids, you know, and maybe they just drop them off for communion and just go to their thing and then just come pick them up. And my joke was, well, they pick them up 20 years later. And that's what they did. They drop them off, raise them, and let me see them again when they're ready to, you know, go to college or something like that. So it's something that unfortunately that you see firsthand, which is really sad. And that, like, you, the church, raise my kid spiritually. I'll do the other stuff.
Yeah. How do other people feel about that? Is there agreement? Have you seen something like that? Some are shaking their heads, nodding their heads. Yeah.
No, but I think I agree with what Abuna Theodore said. I think, me personally, you know, I think my kids may respond or relate better if they're sitting in a Sunday school class with their Sunday school teacher or listening to an Abuna sermon, rather than me maybe at home. Not that we don't do that, but I think there has to be a balance, right? Obviously, the main responsibility has to come from the parent, and it's not just what we say and what we teach. It's how we act and how we serve, right? But I do believe that there is a balance, so to speak, because I know that you know, if my kids went to
the convention like I did when I was a younger, or a retreat, I know they're going to come back very spiritually fulfilled and may come, maybe even far greater than what I can if I sat with them for 3 days. You know what I'm saying? So there is that balance where I do see where I have to do my part, but without a doubt, if I have an opportunity for them to sit with you or any other Buna or learn or go to retreat and sit with a spiritual leader of the church, I think that can have a profound effect on them.
Mm-hmm. So are we saying that we value highly what the church can supplement? Is that what you mean? Or are you saying, I trust the church to do what I feel I cannot do? How would you clarify that? And that's open for everybody. Yeah. And I don't mean to, but, that's a yes?
I think just answering your question, who can be responsible for raising our kids?
Not who can, who should.
Who should? It's supposed to be the parents and the church together. Cannot be the parents by themselves, cannot be the church by themselves. And if we start splitting, it will not work. The parents cannot provide sacraments to the kids, like the confession, like other sacraments, the spiritual advice. The parents cannot do that. The way I grew up myself, the parents always take me to church, take me to Sunday school, talk to us, make sure that we're at home, we are praying, reading the Bible, we're doing that. But in the same time, I had the father of confession that at church that I go to and I confess, and he asked me, did you pray? Did you pray the Agbeya? Did you do that? Did you read the Bible? Where is it? Here is a table which you write down every time the table, like for each day that we cross, make an X. I prayed. The 11 hours, I make an X. I read the Bible, I made an X.
Mom and Dad set up a chart for you?
The chart.
And you would complete that chart on a
complete that chart. And
weekly
we complete
basis?
that chart with a priest, my father of confession. So we do that. So I think it's both the parents and the church themselves, and we see it in other people.
So what I hear from you is that your parents got you to the father of confession, right? Got you to the church.
Got you to the church and...
Yeah, but they got you there.
Correct.
Good. That's my point.
So I'll just repeat the question that I've asked everybody generally. Are we of the opinion that sometimes we take our kids and ask the church what we feel we cannot do, or what we feel we are unqualified to do? Or are we more of the opinion that we need the church as a supplement to what is our foundation at home?
So, parents are primary. That's my opinion. Parents are primary. The foundation starts at home. And in my opinion, the church is a supplement to that. But to me, it's very clear that the parents are primary and the foundation starts at home.
Okay. Foundation starts at home, and the church is a supplement. And we can continue to talk some more. Yep.
It's very quick. I agree with Sam. I think parents are primary.
Parents are primary.
Not all churches have a positive effect on kids, believe it or not. There's churches that have negative effects on kids. I mean, let's face it. There's kids that leave the church because either it's too long or they don't understand what's going on. They don't understand Coptic or for whatever reason. But parents should be primary. You don't need a church to raise a kid. Church should be supplemental, but to a very small degree. I don't think so, a large degree. If you have, that's the ideal situation. What are the actual situations is sometimes you have messed up parents and a good church. Sometimes you have good parents and messed up church.
I think if you just look at the pure numbers, the kids spend so much more time with us than they'll ever spend with a Sunday school teacher or a priest or at church. I mean, just the law of numbers, which sometimes actually scares me because they spend more time at school and with their regular school teachers than they do with us in some cases. So I think just by sheer numbers, the family, whether we like it or not, they are learning from us. Even if we're not literally instructing them, they are learning from us just because they're exposed to us so much.
Very good, very good.
Sorry. I wanted to say
Monica,
something.
go ahead.
I wanted to put a different twist on it.
Sure.
I do think that the church is actually the foundation, but we are the tools, the parents are, to bringing the kids and installing that foundation in them. So that's where I'm coming from.
Very nice. Okay, so the bridge question, how would you know that your child has a relationship with Christ as his Lord? Or how do you know? How do you know your child has a relationship with Christ as his Lord? Or her Lord?
If you do, your child does.
Well, I have to hear.
Your child lives with you 24 hours a day.
John, you can pass the mic so that everybody can hear, please.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm not angry, but this is how I look. This is me. Okay. But
I'm not angry.
if I have a true relationship with God as my Lord, if I close my eyes when I'm in trouble or I'm having a problem and say, help me, God, which I don't. But and my child sees this, then what would possibly prevent him from doing the same?
The world around him.
But I am around him right now more than the world. Even the church, he goes to church 6 hours a week.
Okay. I like your question, your answer, but I just want to ask if you could be more specific. Think about that in the sense that we need a litmus test. How many of you want to know whether your son or daughter has a relationship with Christ as his Lord?
Raise your hand.
One person says, Tracy says, you ask them. What do you think?
You ask them what?
Sunday school answer. Why don't you have that dialogue about an ongoing dialogue from when you're little?
Ongoing. Can we pass the mic to Tracy? Mike will hold the mic for you.
I'm sure. I just think if you start when they're young and you have an ongoing dialogue about what that means, you can't just come up when they're 12 and go, hey, do you have a relationship with Jesus Christ as your Lord? But if you start that ongoing dialogue when they're young and you say, this is what Jesus wants from us, is Jesus is your friend, Jesus, establishing that foundation, and then as they grow, I'm actually at the point where I am asking my kids point blank, like, do you have conversations with Jesus? Is he your Savior? Do you recognize him as the Savior of your soul and the forgiver of your sins? And that's important for me to know. So I have 2 kids at the age I can ask that, but that's not out of the blue. I hope that I establish that this is how we operate. So, and that's our family value.
Yeah.
Others may, you may not, that whole thing. So, I should hope that isn't just like a question you ask out of the blue. It's a foundation.
There would have been a foundation that was laid over time. Right. Okay. Other comments?
I agree with Tracy. My initial reaction to your question was, I don't know if we'll ever know if the kid has a, true relationship with Christ, but I think her approach and answer is good. And, before coming here, I was talking to one of my friends, and she is a devout Catholic, and her parents and family, were always involved in the Catholic Church, and her son was an altar boy for, I don't know how many years, 15 years, 20 years, and then he just came home He's a senior in college. He came home a couple months ago with a girl to get married to, and she doesn't believe in God completely. Her family's separated. Her parents are separated, but that's not the issue. The main issue is she doesn't even believe in God. So his mom, of course, was kind of shocked, disappointed. His grandma is even more upset. And, it made me question kind of like, well, what went wrong there? Is it, this is a boy who grew up in the church as an altar boy, like Uncle Atif had mentioned. And so I kind of feel like, I don't know if you ever know, or it's just you constantly have to pray for your kids, to have that faithful relationship.
Okay. So one person says you can ask, but you may never know, basically. Is that right? Okay. All right. Other people?
Is there any indication that you can watch and find out in your kids that they have a relationship with Christ? I put that question because to me, I think it is very important. And yeah, you may ask the kid questions, but is there any things you can monitor?
Yeah, so having younger kids, I think you have to teach them to have that relationship. I mean, when you're talking about 2, 3, 4, 5-year-olds, it's the teaching them to pray, praying with them, teaching them how to talk to God, teaching them about who Jesus is, because they can't see Jesus. They can't hear him except through reading the Bible. But the indications when you start to see that they're actually having that relationship is when you start seeing them mentioning Jesus, about when you're talking about, well, a rainbow or the birds, or, well, they're talking about, oh, Jesus made this, or even when they do something wrong and they feel that, well, Jesus isn't happy with them. And I see different when, in at least my kids, when you tell them when they do something wrong, you think that made Jesus very happy? One gets much more disappointed sometimes than the other, and how they feel about how they've disappointed maybe Jesus and how they apologize. And then when you're talking about supplementing, that's when the church gets involved. So now we talk about introducing confession and things. But I think the relationship really starts when they're younger, and you have to start that foundation. And then when they do get older, absolutely, like what Tracy was talking about, in talking to them about that relationship and discussing it with them. But I think it builds their conscience, essentially, and you start seeing in their behavior and how they act.
Very good. Yeah.
Good.
Real quick example. I think it's kind of funny. So I always put my little guy to sleep, Zach. And when he was about 3, he's 5 now. When he was maybe 3, I lay down with him for a couple minutes, and then I'd say, okay, I'm going to go, but Jesus is laying with you. Jesus is with you right now. He's laying with you. And every day he said, but I don't see him. I don't see him. I go, Jesus is with you. He's with you, laying in bed with you, right? So every day, it's, obviously he wasn't old enough to comprehend, but we would talk about it, and hey, Jesus is your best friend. And then, maybe when he became 4, or after a year or so, every day I'd say, Jesus is laying with you, and he'd say, I know, you're right. And then he would be fine letting me go. So it's just, just the reinforcement, knowing that Jesus is there to comfort him, and just having that relationship is critical.
Really good. Really nice.
These are all great answers because, as we can see, it starts from day one. The presence of the Lord in their lives starts from day one. The question is, when you ask the kid at the age of 14, that same question, or what kind of indications that you can observe or monitor in your growing up kid, whether he has a relationship with the Lord or not. That's very important.
For the older kids, I guess it's most important when you see your what you did in the childhood for the children in younger age. I think for this age, most important to me when I see him is he's still read his Bibles at home. He still have his quiet time. He's very serious about going have the communion. He's very serious every month or less than that have, the session with the father of confession. And if I see this kind of sign and without even I ask him, I know if he have a relationship with God or not.
Very good. Very good.
One of the things that we want to encourage is an active monitoring of each of your children's spiritual life. It's not just merely observing from a distance, but kind of looking for these milestones or these fruits, so to speak. So that's a good perspective. Was there somebody else with a Father Theodore?
I just had a question. You're saying actively monitoring. Are we suggesting something that could put the kids off because they feel like, have you done this, have you done that, or is that something that comes up later? Maybe I asked the question.
No, I'm glad you did. It does come up later. Yeah, we have to be very, very careful to be intentional, but not micromanagers. And micromanagement of your child's spirituality is essentially another syndrome that results in a put-off. And we'll talk a little bit about sin management, which I think is something that we need to avoid. And we'll talk more about that.
I was just going to add, though, but I think back to Tracy's point, if you've been having ongoing dialogues with your children their whole life about the growth of their relationship with Christ, then when they're 14 and saying, hey, did you read your Bible today, shouldn't be any kind of a shocker of a question. Like I ask my son that every night when I tell him good night, have you read your Bible yet? Yes or no. He'll say, he'll answer either way. And then, okay, just don't forget, make sure you do it. Make sure you pray after you read your Bible. And because this has been such a fundamental part of his life since he was an infant, it doesn't really make him feel like he's put out. It's kind of part of the routine now.
Not to sound like the devil's advocate, but how do we avoid being legalistic in the process? Because I think that's the problem we hear from the kids, where they grow up and they felt it was a regimen rather than the real spiritual depth. And I think that's how do you avoid being the Pharisee?
I think we definitely agree. I think we will be talking a little bit more about that.
We'll get into it.
Yeah. But it's an absolutely imperative point. Yeah.
If for any reason we don't address the question, please call us out on it.
Yeah.
We intend, that's something we actually we want to get to. So.
We're going to go for more?
Okay, I'm going to stay on schedule. I need to stop locking this thing. Why is it that several of the children who regularly attend church leave the church when they grow up? What are reasons?
This question can either be your opinion or it can be a fact if you have a statistic, either one.
Just for those of you who have entered, the question is based on a statistic that Dr. Atif shared, that some 70% of those who are raised in the church, and Father Theodore saying in the Greek church, by their own admission, in this generation, end up leaving the faith.
My opinion is probably the most important reason is there's a lot of hypocrisy in the house. So yeah, they attend church, maybe even every week, but there's every badness happening inside the house as well. I guess another reason, don't mean to take all the reasons, but if they start hanging out with the wrong crowd and things like that, and that's not caught early enough and guided back into the right direction.
Or a wrong church.
Do you want to elaborate?
I know for a fact 2 young kids who left church because, and this is not in here, this is in France, Coptic church. And they left the church because they just, there was a great level of hypocrisy in there, in the church. So.
Anybody else? Maggie?
Real quick, I think
Yeah.
sin can be very fun.
Yeah.
And I think it's a very slippery slope. I don't think I need this. You know, it's really hard to stay on this really fine path. And as soon as they become at the age where they see sin in a fun way, with worldly fun, I think that's it. I think it's a very quick process, actually. I see a lot of patients who, parents, oh, they were on the right track, this, and this, not even 6 months into freshman year, or 8th grade, or 5th grade for that matter, where my school starts junior high. So I think it's a very easy answer. The solution isn't easy, though.
Sin is responsible then. What about, I'm going to ask a follow-up, and if you're not sure of the answer, then we can open it up. But what about you and I, who were faced with that sin too, and who fell to that sin, and who, like, why are we still here? How is it that we made it?
I can kind of, for me, I think it's my parents. So I grew up in a church that I would say that the majority of the people that I grew up with do not come to church anymore. And I think that was a factor of not a solid church community. There was a lot of judgment and lack of forgiveness and lack of acceptance, and this atmosphere that was kind of competitive and that kind of thing within the church community. So there wasn't a lot of love there. And if it wasn't for my parents creating a church in the home, I wouldn't have been attached to the church and wanting to stay there even through that. So I think that the reason everyone in this room is the way they are is because of their parents.
Can I ask you, can you think of an example of how love was created in your home?
Well, my parents definitely fought, so I saw them fight, so that's not like, what it was. They just loved each other. They still love each other and love each other's quirks. And they were very disciplined in teaching us how to pray, reading the Bible with us. Not that either of them were perfect. I mean, everyone, both of my parents had things that they were always trying to work on, but there was like this, Christ is the reason that we do everything. Christ is the center of our lives. Trust in the Lord, and every time difficult things happened, we'd see miracles happen. And that was something amazing, is that my parents would always point out the miracles out of the difficult things. And I think just that experience of seeing the miracles out of all the difficult things that we went through really had created the atmosphere of Christ just in our lives.
So it sounds like what you're expressing is that the Lord Jesus was intertwined in your life.
Intertwined, yes.
From the trials and the tribulations to the love to the spiritual practices in your home. Yep. Additional comments?
I think it is, and my oldest is 14. I think it is a lot harder right now for a kid growing up in this day and age than it was for us. Okay, I think that is without a doubt. Especially with all of us, our parents were, we were first generations for the most part. Our parents, for the most part, kind of sheltered us, that we hung out with other, I don't want to just say other Egyptians, but other families that had the same morals and values and upbringing and, for the most part, culture. And, I think growing up there was just a lot easier than what our kids are exposed to. And it's not just that. Obviously, our kids are, with the internet, with everything that they see, school and what they're exposed to at like age 11 and 12. I don't even remember if I even saw it at 17 or 18. You know what I'm saying? So they have a lot more thrown at them out of the world. And I think it's a lot more challenging for them to be raised in this environment than it was for us.
Okay. Now the statistic that we're hearing is kind of retrospective. We got to keep that in mind, because if we're saying today that we know that 70 to 90% have left the church, then that's applying to folks who grew up maybe around our time or maybe a little bit later than our time. But I hear you and I feel you when you say it's harder this age in this generation than it's ever been. I agree. Behind you, Mike. Sorry, I don't know your name.
Jenny.
Johnny.
Oh, John. Jenny.
John, Jenny. Yep, my wife talks for me too. Go right ahead.
Oh, no, I think I had something too. So you had asked how are we all still sitting here if we've all fell to the sin? And I think ultimately it goes back to the social pressures our kids are exposed to when they get around that 5th, 6th, 7th grade into college. There's so many social pressures that it's hard. I mean, kids are weak. I mean, we're all weak, and kids are weaker. And I think as we develop and become stronger as adults, none of us can really say that we feel pressure from our friends anymore. It's not like that anymore. So it's easy to kind of find yourself back on that path, I think, where I think for those really, middle school, high school kids, I think it goes back to society. I mean, it's easy to blame everybody else, like the society, not us, but I think that that's a very influential factor because we can keep them under our wings for, maybe 7, 8, 9 years, and then I think after that it goes back to our foundation. Do we have that? Because if we do, I think they will come back. And
come back to Christ, come back to the church, come back to home.
I think everything.
Everything.
I hope everything.
Yeah. Okay.
So Abuna, you asked about the litmus test, and I'll tell you, I think based on...
Yeah, just to refer to that litmus, for anybody who missed it, the litmus test is we want to know whether each of our children has come to the point where they have a relationship with his Christ.
And, when you get older, and I'm thinking about my friends and people that I know that are not as close or have even left the church, it's college. I mean, that's, to me, the test. I mean, here you are, you spend, 18 years raising your kid, and then you send them off to college. What happens? And I think all of us went to college. Some of us went away, some stayed home, and we all have friends that went away, stayed home. And I think you see a huge difference with the ones that go off to college and what happens, and some that their relationships with Christ, their parents, the church are very strong, and some you never see them again. And I even look at our church, and there's a huge gap with generations right after they go to college, and then you look and you see who's still there at church, who's still serving, maybe 10%. I mean, I think that's the critical time when it's a make it or break it, because there's all the social pressures of the world, but then they're also introduced to new ideas. And even people who now start thinking about, is there even really a God? I mean, would a God allow any of this stuff that's happening in today's world, new ideas, it's all kinds of things.
This is precisely what this retreat will address, and we hope that all these questions we will find some answers to them, although may not be perfect, but I think each one of us contributes quite a bit to this search. We're all searching our minds, our hearts, and it's sort of self-questioning now. What are we doing? What are we doing in our spiritual life? What were we doing with our children? And it goes beyond we just taking them to church and doing this and that. And I am very happy with the answers because they actually very mature and very good answers. But of course the problem is still there, as you can see it.
I feel if you put the strong foundation before the age of 6, from 0 to 6 is the most important stage of their development. If you put a strong foundation of the love of God, they will become very true Christians. Even if they stray, as Jenny said, they'll come back. But the first 6 years in life are the most important stage in their development. That's why in the Montessori school we keep telling them, I love Jesus. Jesus is my best friend. I love Jesus. Jesus is my best friend.
I worry a little bit about that sentence, just for one reason. If I'm a parent and I have a child who's past that magic number and I don't think I've done it right, I spend the rest of my kids' teenage years blaming myself, and I feel that all is lost. So I hear that word a lot, and a lot of very spiritual people always used to tell us this, like the first 5 years, the first 6 years, and then lo and behold, my kid is 10, and I realized I haven't done what I was supposed to be doing, and it's like, oops, well, better luck next time. Maybe I should have the other kid and start all over again.
We're definitely going to speak about the grace of God, which comes at any time. And the grace of God actually lifts all of us and takes care of our faults. It's better today than tomorrow.
Because none of us in that first 6 years have done the perfect job.
Actually, no parent, by the way, does the perfect job. We're not here to say we're perfect or we're going to even be perfect. But with the grace of God, we will attempt and He will help us. He's around.
I agree with what Tant Frayel said, because the first few years, if you think about 0 to 6, are those years when you are really absolutely their primary influence. I mean, unless, there are extenuating circumstances. But I mean, I personally am an example that's not, across the board. I mean, I wasn't raised in a Christian home. And I, made that choice myself when I was 14. And even then kind of didn't know what to do with it until I got to college. And so for me, college was actually the opposite of what it turns out to be for a lot of people. In that age when you're asking a lot of questions and you have a foundation of no God, sometimes if you get the right people in your path, it can actually lead you to God. And I actually saw that happen with a number of my friends where we became Christians while we were in school, in our late teens and early 20s. So by all means, it's not to discourage anybody. If you messed up the first 6 years, there's plenty of hope for your kids still, which, like Uncle Atif said, we'll definitely get into that as we go. Yeah.
This is the last question we have on the list, and that are general questions. And this one, I might rephrase it a little bit. I'll read it to you as it is. It says, do you think that the Coptic Orthodox youth are better than the rest of Christians in the rest of the Christians in America?
As far as the relationship with the Lord.
We have one priest who's laughing, and we have someone else who's shaking their head. So, can you tell us what this body language means? It's a trick question.
What age group are we talking about?
In general.
It's just generally speaking. Generally speaking, do you think the Coptic Orthodox youth are better than the rest of the Christians in America?
Johnny, you had a comment? We have a comment back here.
Sure. Welcome all comments.
I'll try to address this. I think it's difficult to say yes or no, because the Coptic Orthodox youth, it's not just a group of Christians. This is a culture. It's a community where every family may have a different relationship with God and with Christ. So it's difficult to say that. So just because someone's part of the church and going to church doesn't mean that that family is actually raising their children Christian and that family is actually Christian. It's sad to say that, or they're actually having a relationship with Christ. So not that I'm saying that other Christian communities may not have that, but other Christian communities, people are at that church out of a choice, out of a faith, not necessarily out of a cultural attachment. So I think that it's a little bit of a difficult thing to say that they're less or different, because of the cultural influences in our community.
Okay. Yeah. Others?
Being Coptic Orthodox, well, you have the access to a very rich resource of spirituality and Christianity, but it's really up to you whether you're going to use it or not. You have the access available. It's up to you. But does it, I don't know if it makes you a better person that you're Coptic Orthodox. I don't think it does, but it gives you advantage, I think.
Okay. Yeah.
I think the question, with all due respect, is a bogus question.
Fair enough. I put it.
So I'll be leaving shortly. I think the question is a bogus question because the answer is not important. The answer is not comparing us to others and others to us and this sect to that sect of Christianity, Catholic versus Orthodox versus Protestant versus whatever. The question should be, what are we doing in order for Coptic Orthodox youth who are fortunate enough to be born into and raised in a faith that is so rich and so so full of life and full of everything that enables those children and people who, or the children of people who are sitting here in order to fully experience relationship with Christ? I think that is a more appropriate question as opposed to, well, we're better than the Protestants. Well, but they, raise their hands above their shoulders with palms face out. I don't think that's important. And I don't think comparing and contrasting is something, in my opinion, and I'll speak for myself, is something that's very healthy. I think a lot of Coptic Orthodox individuals get into trouble when you go down that road because it's a very slippery slope.
I knew that there are a lot of competent lawyers in the audience.
What's your name? What's your name? Peter. Nice to meet you, Peter.
This Peter is a successful lawyer.
That's the only kind we got.
Or retired ones, whatever.
See, I don't know a lot of
The
youth.
question was just to open up the discussion, not to suggest are worse or better or the same, or what denominations we're talking about. It can be other Orthodox. It can be anything.
Great question. Abir?
I do not know a lot of youth, like personally from outside Coptic Church. I may hear from my own kids about their friends. But I do recall that I heard at Moody, and these are not Coptic Orthodox people, and they have other statistics a little bit different than what Uncle Atif said. I really do not remember a lot of details about the statistics, but I do remember what came to my mind right after I heard it, and also I read an article, it was a while ago, that Orthodox faith in general, they do keep their youth in the church a lot way more than other religions, like Protestant, or it was Moody Church itself, they made
By the way, the statistics I told you that was done in a large city, Coptic Orthodox youth, was not about whether they go to church or not.
I know.
It's about their behavior, the risky behavior between them.
Yeah.
So the question of keeping them in the church was not the end point, was the behavior.
Other thoughts on the bogus question?
No, I think it was the DVD.
All right, before we go to the DVD, okay, you want to make a comment? And then I want to just close with a comment.
I mean, it is kind of a bogus question, and I think that you kind of caught the point. The point is partly to get us thinking about what preconceived ideas we have about ourselves as parents in a church that has a rich tradition, and as parents who have kids who currently do attend church, we need to start examining, are we relying on some of our preconceived ideas as truth, rather than actually looking at our own families and looking at our children and looking at what's really going on inside of my house. So you kind of caught us. But I think that's a good way to lay the foundation for what we're going to be talking about as we go on. Yeah.
So the way I wanted to rephrase the question, which would have given it away, would have been, do you think there is a danger in believing that Coptic Orthodox youth are better than other Christians in America? And the reason I ask you that question, do you think there's a danger, is because we need to look at what the consequences are of our positioning ourselves that way. Do you guys have a thought on that? Do you think there is any danger in considering our denomination better, categorically better? Yeah.
If we think this way, it means we are thinking that we are immune to sin. We're immune to falling. Nothing going to happen to us. And soon as we think this way, This is a fall itself. And this is prejudice, and this is when they start falling down this road, and there is no wake up in this one. Because somebody can commit the sins and continue committing the sins when they think, I am better. I am better. I don't need repentance. I don't need this. And all of a sudden, you're going to wake up after many years, far, far, far away from God. And he even doesn't know how to come back. The good thing about being Christians in our Coptic church, that we learn from little ones then how to come back. How to, because we're going to sin every day, but we know how to come back. But if we think this way, that means we are immune to sin, and I think this is a dangerous stuff.
Yeah, good point.
So I know a lot of parents in the past thought, well, you know, if there's an activity at church, I'll just send the kids to church and they'll be fine. And they don't know, is the kid attending the activity? Is he running around, you know, in the stairwells? Is he behaving? They just send him to church and don't worry, the church will raise him. Obviously, you know, as parents, we got to take more of a role in making sure they're participating in the programs. I think that the benefit I consider in going to a Coptic church is that it is one community, and you actually know the people you go to church with. There are programs that your kids can get involved in. They have an opportunity to grow up with other kids and develop a network of friends, a fellowship that, you know, they can count on in the future when they go off to college. I mean, now I do see other churches doing that, where they're making sure there are programs for the kids, but to me that was the big benefit.
Okay. Yeah. Anyone else? Yeah.
I could have been like
That's
during
cool.
interception. I'll throw it to you.
Feel free to stretch.
So maybe this is a little bit of a thinking out loud, but if I read your question, it's, tell me if I'm paraphrasing it incorrectly. Do I think the Coptic Orthodox Church is the best church? Is that an unfair paraphrase?
Yeah, I was saying, is there a danger to believing that the youth of the Coptic Orthodox Church are better than the rest of the Christian youth in America?
Okay, then.
Not that the church is better.
Okay, I got you. Then, because I had an issue with the other part, but I'm okay with that. And I'll throw it back to Jacob.
So, I want to make a distinction between pride in our church and pride, right? To be thankful to God for what your church has given you, and to appreciate the richness and the depth and the sacraments, to appreciate the pastoral care that's kind of interwoven into the life of the Coptic Orthodox Church and its family and its heritage and the patristics and the monasticism and the history and the archaeology, and we could go on and on. That's nice. Appreciating it, valuing it is good. But to believe that because my child is a member of this church, one, I can relax. It's good. It's all good. And when I compare my neighbor's kid who goes to the local Protestant church and my kid who goes to the local Coptic church, I can just go on automatic pilot because my kid goes to the Coptic Orthodox church. That's a danger. But there's another danger that I want to just ask you to consider. If we believe inherently that our church is just the very greatest, to the point that we also begin to insulate ourselves from our community and from our neighbors because we think our church is great, then how are we going to be messengers of the gospel of Jesus Christ? How are we going to do that? How can I, on one hand, say, this is the greatest church ever, and everybody else out there is not so great? And at the same time say, you know, come and meet Jesus Christ. Incompatible, incongruent. And The issue is what you want to raise your children to be. Do you want to raise your children to be living gospels, or do you want to raise your children to believe they belong to an executive country club where it's exclusive and where others who are outside the club don't measure up? That's a danger. We need to be aware of that. All right. Now on that, we thought we'd show you a segment of a video. It's a bit, Sam, read that number at the end. Is it 8 minutes or 10 minutes? I can't see it. Oh, okay. Bear with us a little bit. I'll let Uncle Atif tell you what to skip or if anything. But can we dim the lights a little bit?
Are you able to stay 20 minutes? Okay.
Hit the first one, session 1.
Session number 1.
Growing up, our church used to have a youth camp in the summertime, and so we'd kind of go to those things, you know, as we had opportunities to do.
When I was a kid, I went to Camp Grace. I remember having to wear flip-flops in the showers because they were gross.
One year it was a work camp where you go for a lesser price, but you have to work it. And they put me with the wood chipper. And as we were loading the logs on, another team's log went rolling down and just about severed my thumb. And so I spent the rest of that Bible camp in the emergency room and then leaving early for home.
I was a chaperone at church camp, and that's where I realized that I didn't want girls. They were horrible. They had the messiest cabins, they were the worst behaved, and the boys were so sweet and nice.
I just remember going out on a bus, singing songs, and having a lot of fun.
You know, I had a very strange, or I should say unique upbringing. I was raised at a Bible camp. My dad was a Bible camp director, and you know how it is. A lot of people go to Bible camp and they have a great experience at camp. A lot of people send their kids to camp, and a lot of kids come to Christ at camp. And one of the primary reasons why is because it's this intentional Christian environment where everything is about Jesus. I mean, the games you play are about Jesus, the meals, everything you do, 24 hours, everything's about Jesus. And so it's like you leave the real world and then you go to this intentional Christian environment, and then we're surprised that when you're in an environment that's all about Jesus, that yeah, people come close to Christ there. Well, imagine being raised at that environment. I mean, that was normal for me. That was my home. 500 acres is my backyard, 100 new friends to play with every week. I mean, it was just this incredible place to grow up. So Christianity for me was 24 hours, 7 days a week, and yet I would notice my dad, a lot of times I'd go with him when he'd go visit the churches during the off season. He'd have to preach or things of that nature, and I would just go with him, and I'd see those same campers that were so fired up for Christ at camp. And then I'd see them in their churches 6 months later, and it was like somebody had put a fire extinguisher on their faith, and it really bothered me. And it almost, to be honest, it left me with an attitude of, it's got to be the church's fault. So I became a kind of anti-church guy. I was kind of this, camp is cool, church is boring, I'm never going to work for the church, I'm just going to always work in Bible camping. Well, never say never to God. You know, I started out, I did camping for 4 years, and then God called me into the church. And I had the privilege to serve as a youth and family pastor in 3 churches in Minneapolis, and then for over 12 years, and then as a senior pastor out in California for 7 years. And it didn't take me long to realize where the problem was. It wasn't the church. The problem was what was happening in individual homes, individual households. And I think that that's what we have to realize today is Satan has moved his attack. I mean, we know Satan wants to bring down Christianity, always has, always will. But instead of going at the church, because if he went at the church, it'd be like if you've ever taken a group of pencils, put them all together, and tried to break a group of pencils, it's almost impossible to do. Well, Satan knows he's trying to break the church would be pretty hard. Yet if you take one by keeping all his decrees and commands that I give you, and so that you may enjoy long life. Love this, because whenever you see a "so that" in the Bible, circle it, because there's a significant point coming behind it. And in verse 2, you see 2 "so that" statements. The first is, so that you, your children, and their children after them. The first point that Moses is trying to make very clearly is that the decision that you make, whether you're going to live your life God's way or not, it's not only going to impact you, it's going to impact your children and your children's children. You're going to see the blessings of that for generations to come. So this is a big deal. And then the second "so that" statement is so that you may enjoy long life. Well, how many of us want that? Isn't that what we want? Is to enjoy long life? And realize he's not just talking about 80 to 90 years here on earth. He's talking eternal life. So let me ask that again. How many of you want to enjoy eternal life? And realize, let's take it a step further. He's not just talking this again for you. He's talking about this for your children and your children's children. How many of us here want our children and our children's children to enjoy eternal life? Do you see how big of a deal this is? The choice you make, whether you're going to do life God's way or not, is going to have eternal ramifications for multiple generations. So this is a really Big deal. And then that's why he goes on in verse 3 to say, "Hear, O Israel." And he has to repeat that again in verse 4. Here's what you need to know. Hear, O Israel. Here's what you need to follow. Hear, listeners, all of you that are listening today. Hear, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength. These commandments that I give you today are to be upon your hearts. Impress them on your children. Do you hear the two things we need to know? The two things we need to understand, the two things we must embrace. The first is that there is one God. One true God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Don't buy into anything that's telling you there's other gods out there or that there's multiple paths to God. That's just not true. There is one true God, and we are called to live in a loving relationship with Him. We're not just called to go to church and hang out at church on Sunday morning. We're not just called to throw our kids into a church program. No, we are called to live in a loving relationship with the God of the universe through His Son, Jesus Christ. Question, are you in love with God? Let me ask it more personal. In fact, I heard this challenge once from a speaker. He said, who would your kids say you're in love with? Did you ever go home and try that one? I took that challenge, went home, thought, all right, I'm up for this challenge. So I went home and picked up my daughter from school and said, hey, Malin, I just have a question for you today. She's like, what's that, Daddy? I said, who is your daddy in love with? And of course, she's sitting there going, what? And I said, no, it's okay. This is a simple question. I just want to know, who would you say that I'm in love with? And then there was a part of me that was going, maybe I shouldn't have asked her, because she's a really honest 13-year-old. But thankfully, in what was a defining moment for me, my daughter simply responded, well, Daddy, that's easy. You're in love with God, Mommy, and me. I remember a big part of me was like, whew, I survived that one. But are we living in such a way that people would say we're in love with God? And did you notice in this passage, it says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, your soul, your strength, before it says, impress this on your children. Friends, you can't pass something on to your kids that you don't have yourself. And that word, impress this on your children, fascinating word in the Greek. That word literally means to be ingrained or to be permanently fixed to who you are. It's like being branded. Sometimes you've seen cattle that have been branded, and once a cow's been branded, they're branded for life. Would you like your child to have a faith that is with them for life? That no matter what happens, they're going to stick with the faith. Is that the type of faith you want them to have? Well, if that's the faith you want them to have, it's about you. Do you love the Lord? Because your child is going to be in love with who you're in love with. I love Andrew and Kendall, and my daughter loves Andrew and Kendall. We love Brian and Roberta and Doug and Amy, and our daughter loves Brian and Roberta and Doug and Amy. I love pepperoni pizza with salt on it. I know that sounds sick, but that's okay. My daughter loves pepperoni with salt on it. I mean, our kids fall in love with what we're in love with.
My daddy loves me and my sister and my mom and my whole family. My mom loves my family and my sister and I, the one that's looking at porn right now. My mommy loves Daddy. My mama loves my daddy. Me and Mara. My daddy loves me, my sister, and my brother. Yeah, anybody else? He loves God too. Evan and Grant. My mom loves me. She loves my brother, she loves my sister too, and she loves God. Mariah and Garen. She's got a lot of love, huh? My dad loves my family and my God. Yeah.
My dad loves our family and his work.
If you want your child to be in love with God, the question is, are you in love with God? If you want your child to be a child of prayer, are you a person of prayer? If you want your child to be committed to serving the Lord, are you serving the Lord? And then, of course, the passage goes on to say, impress this on your children by, and then it goes on by talking about these things. When you walk along the road, when you lie down, when you get up, tie them as symbols on your hands, bind them on your foreheads, write them on the doorframes of your houses and on your gates. Oh, I love that passage. How else do you impress your kids? First, by you loving the Lord, living in a loving relationship, but then by you living it. By you talking about it. And I love what it says. It doesn't say take them to church and let church tell it for you. Let church talk about God. No, it says you talk about these things. You need to talk about God. You need to talk about faith. And where do you do it at? At home. I mean, I'm not making this up. This is right out of His Word. And then the other references, I mean, 3 of the 4 references are at home. Talk about them when you sit at home, when you walk along the road, or today's context, when you're in the minivan driving along the road, when you lie down and when you get up. Where do you lie down and where do you get up at? At home. 3 of the 4 references here. We need to realize the home is the primary place where faith is to be nurtured. There's no mention of take them to a church program and drop them off. It's all about what happens within the context of the home. Now, am I saying that there's no need for the church? Not at all. Please don't hear me. We desperately need the church. I praise God for Sunday school and praise God for youth ministry and for Bible. Where would we be if we didn't have those things? I mean, we need the church. But the role of the church is to be a reinforcement, not a replacement. It's not meant to be a drop-off center. My wife was reading a magazine called How to Get More Time Out of Your Day, a secular magazine. She was getting on a treadmill. She was getting ready to work out. And so it was just this article on how to get more time out of your day. And she said she almost fell off the treadmill. Well, in the middle of the list of things that they were saying of ways that you can get more time out of your day was take your kids, enroll them in a church Sunday school program, and then use that time to go get your shopping done. I mean, whoa, is that what the church has become? I mean, we live in this outsource kind of mentality, do we not? I mean, we look to outsource everything. Oh, I don't have time to cook a meal today, so I'll just swing by the restaurant and go through a drive-thru, and they can take care of feeding us today. And we really don't have time to consistently clean the house, so we'll get a house cleaner to come in once a week and do that for us. And oh, I don't have time to teach my kids soccer, so here you go, soccer coach. You teach my kids soccer. And oh, yes, I want my kid to know Jesus too, but I don't know how to do that, and I don't have time to, so here you go, church. That's your job. Teach my kid faith. Boy, if you don't hear anything else I say, I hope you hear this. Faith, a true faith that's going to be impressed on their hearts forever, that's not something that can be taught. Faith is something that has to be caught, kind of like a cold. This will make sense in a minute. When my daughter goes to school and gets a cold and brings it home, what happens next? You know, it's just a matter of time, and eventually my wife and I are going to be sniffing and sneezing, and eventually we all have the cold, and it just goes from person to person. That's the same way it is with faith. If it's in the home, everybody catches it. Because you know what? Here's what I want to say today. It's not that we have bad parents today. In fact, what I'm seeing today is we have parents who desperately want to be better parents than even the household they were raised in. Many young adults are waiting longer to get married, longer to have kids. Why do you think Oprah and Dr. Phil are so popular today? Is people today desperately want it to go well in their household. And yet we have the one thing every family needs to succeed, Christ in the center of the home. But they don't know how to bring Christ, because we're now living 3 or 4 generations removed from the last generation that even remembers what it was like to have prayer in the home, Bible reading in the home, devotions in the home, faith life in the home, faith talk in the home. It's not that we have bad parents today. It's that they grew up in a household where they didn't pray in the home, and they'd have to go all the way back to their grandparents or great-grandparents to be in a household that even remembers what it was like to do that. And so what we need to do, the role of the church today, is to say we have to realize we have to equip people to do it again. And who else is going to equip you to bring Christ and Christ-like living back into the home but the church? You're not going to get it at the YMCA. You're not going to get it at Oprah or Dr. Phil. I'm sorry. They're not going to give it to you. But remember, God wants you and your child and your grandchild to enjoy long, everlasting life. Who's going to show you how to do that? The church. The church is not meant to be a drop-off center. The church is meant to be a lifelong partner that comes alongside you, that helps you know the story, tell the story, and be the story within the context of your own home.
When I was a single mom in New Hampshire, my church definitely came alongside me. At the time I needed a place to stay, and a family that I didn't even know about took me in. And then after that, I went on my own, but they helped me through that whole process.
I have had an incredible pastor and his wife come alongside my husband and I and help us. We were a young couple starting out with 2 small children, and they let us live with them so that we could watch a healthy couple, because we both came from backgrounds that were less than healthy and certainly not perfect, and we didn't really have a great idea of how a really healthy couple worked, and it was amazing to see.
When I was pregnant with my 4th child, I was on bed rest, and I was provided meals at least 3 times a week for over 3.5 months. And they even offered to do like babysitting time so that I could be by myself, and people would come and take the kids and play with the kids. I was really floored by that, actually.
When we'd come home on home ministry assignment, we'd have to visit churches that were supporting us. And as we did that, we'd go from place to place, and inevitably someone would come up to us and say, "We want you to know that we've been praying for you every single day." And one person came up especially and just said, "We were so impressed that you're willing to take your family overseas to the Philippines and to live there and to serve there, that as with our kids, every night before they go to bed, we pray for you." For me, that's probably been one of the most encouraging and humbling things that has happened to us in our service to the Lord.
Let me give you an example of the relationship between church and home. When my daughter was 3, we were serving in a church that understood that the home was the primary place, and they took it seriously that they were going to equip us to live out our faith at home. And we went every year to an event that was going to teach us another faith skill to do in the home. And the first one we went to was with our 3-year-old, was how to bless in the home. And it was a great event where, they had some fun things at first, and then they took our 3-year-olds to another room for a snack, and then they had just us as parents. And they had Rolf Garborg come in and speak to us. And he was a guy that was probably in his mid to late 50s, and he talked about how over the course of his child's life, that from the day she came home, they would go in and lay hands on her and say, "May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face shine on you and be gracious to you. May the Lord look upon you with favor and give you peace. We love you. Amen." And how they did that every night as she grew. They even continued it through the teen years. He said, we debated stopping, but we decided to press on through the teenage years. He said, now I must confess, a lot of times we'd wait till she was already asleep, but it was a little safe for them, but they continued to bless her all the way through. And he said he'll never forget the day they took her to college. He said it was a day they were dreading. They packed up all her stuff, put it in the minivan, took her to college, set up her dorm room, had a very tearful goodbye, but then he had his wife's hand, and they were not looking back. They were down the steps and halfway across the parking lot. They could see their minivan when all of a sudden in the distance they heard their daughter saying, "Mom, Dad, wait! Mom, Dad, wait!" And Rolf turned around, and there came their 18-year-old daughter running across the parking lot saying, "You can't go yet. You forgot to bless me." And he said there in that crowded college campus parking lot, the 3 of them huddled up, and he laid his hands on his little girl that wasn't so little anymore. And may the Lord bless you and keep you, hon. May the Lord make his face shine on you and be gracious to you. May the Lord look upon you with favor and give you peace. We love you, hon. Amen. He then looked at us as parents and said, they grow up fast. I thought you might want to start that ritual today. Well, the timing was impeccable, because what happened next was the doors opened and in came our 3-year-olds. And now it was like a race as to who would get to her first between my wife and I. And I was like, "Get behind me, honey." And I went and I grabbed her, my daughter, I put her on my knee for the first time, and I tried to recite that blessing. Of course, I didn't get it all right. I just kind of stumbled through it and so forth. And from that night on, every night, we've been blessing her since. Well, somehow my daughter grew up into a 13-year-old. I really don't know how that happened, but when I got on the plane to leave for a recent speaking trip that I was going on, when they got ready to close the door, my daughter and I were texting one another. That's kind of the thing now with 13-year-olds. That's pretty much how you communicate, is through this text messaging. And we were texting back and forth, and And I said, oh, they're getting ready to close the door, so I'm going to have to go. Her last text message to me was, Daddy, may the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face shine on you and be gracious to you. May the Lord look upon you with favor and give you peace. I love you, Daddy. Be safe. Amen. That's it. The church came alongside us, equipped us to do something we didn't know how to do ourselves. It empowered us to do, then we went home and started doing it. And now my daughter is growing up with that as normal. Tell me that that won't have multi-generational impact. Even though it's going to be hard for me to, because I'm not ready. I'm not even going to let her date until she's 30, but one day she's going to have a child of her own. And that will be normal for her to bless that child, to bless our grandchild. That is what I think the role of the church is. A faith at home focused church, coming alongside faith at home focused parents, equipping them to bring Christ and Christ-like living back into the center of the home.
Can we get the lights? There you go. So now, having heard just this last part of the segment, what do you think the church can do for you? Do you see your church as being a drop-off center for the kids? Or do you see your church doing something a little different? If the church is meant to empower and equip you as parents to be the blessing in your children's lives, doesn't that change your entire perspective? I mean, speaking as a priest, and I remember as a layperson, I used to see people come up to the priests in my churches, say, Abuna, you or the church is not taking care of my kids. The church is not taking care of our youth. How many, raise your hand if you've ever heard anybody say, the church is not taking care of my youth? What if we expected something different? What if we went up to the church and said, is the church empowering and equipping me to take care of my kids? Me to take care of my kids spiritually? That just changes everything. And then what if we expected the church to, as we heard that phrase, come alongside and reinforce everything that God wants us to know? I saw a hand. Was that you, Marianne?
I was going to say, I really love the word intentional. And as I'm getting a little wiser in my years, I'm realizing that it doesn't matter what I'm doing, whether it's meals or raising my kids or work or whatever it is, that I actually have to have kind of a pre-plan for things, boundaries, understanding, training, and whatever I'm lacking to research it. And I feel like a lot of us, speaking of myself, you walk in marriage, you think you know what it is, and then you just really don't. and there's no training ground for that. It's not like learning algebra or something like that. And then same thing with raising kids, and you kind of pitter-patter and go through the motions, but you don't know what you're doing. You know, you try to do it the way your parents did it, but they might have not been the best. Or maybe one side, you know, one spouse was raised totally different than you, and therefore these differences are causing issues. And so hopefully the church can, just like that pastor was saying, you know, they were given this tiny little prayer to say with their daughter, and it just blossomed and lots of fruits. And so I'd love for the church to keep training us in our marriage, like, you know, step by step. This is what you do with the kids. This is what you do, and do it, and be intentional, and you know, and if we have to give up a lot of our own selfish desires as parents, well, like Uncle Atif said one time, parenting isn't for cowards. I mean, we're supposed to give up stuff, done, and give it up for the kids so they can have that relationship.
So something that is striking me is, and if there are other consultants in the audience, they can probably relate. So one thing that I think consulting sells to clients is that we help you validate what you're doing. You know, in some cases we may do it for you, but ultimately you're looking to us for validation, and that's kind of what I'm hearing. The theme here is a church can be a third-party validation of, are you on the right path? Have you considered this? What, you know, should you be doing more of this, and maybe help us on a guided path that can be a little more consistent that we can all follow, versus kind of what Mariana was saying is, as individuals, I think maybe what I'm doing is cool, but I kind of like what I heard Irini say about what, you know, her parents do, or I can learn. And I feel like the family retreat, this Midwest family retreat, helps start that, where we all tend to feel validated, because I remember last year, not to pick on John and Jenny, but I could totally relate to your example of cleaning the van, and we talk about it all the time. We're like, oh yeah, the van's not clean or whatever. And so it helps to validate and be in a community where you can share and learn from each other. So that's kind of what I'm hearing, and it was similar to what I do at work, so I wanted to share.
Others?
I feel like my comment might not be very popular, but something that I heard was that the love of the community, and that the community, church communities, provide support. And I feel like our church lacks a lot of that. So it makes me actually really sad. You know, I don't feel like there is a place where I can go and turn to and, you know, fall on my knees and have people hold me up and help me if I'm struggling. So, yeah, I don't know if you guys feel differently or the same.
Other thoughts?
I just want to comment on what Monica said. I think when we see something lacking, there's 40 couples here that can start being loving to one another and making that community, because that will affect a lot of your kids and grandkids. Once you do that and you really do it, don't forget about us, the old guys. Start something yourself. You have many ways of connecting with each other and knowing each other by whatever, the Facebook and what all that, texting and all this that I know nothing about. But it's a great world we're in. And this, you have 40 couples here. It's a great nucleus.
I was going to say something. Monica, I love you. So that's Irini who said that. But I just wanted to say, so I come from a different, many of you have heard me say this, I came from a different church on the East Coast and a different community. I'm going to get teary-eyed. And we've been in the Chicago area for 4 years. And this is an amazing community. And you guys have to appreciate that. Yes, sometimes people don't support each other. Yes, there's this and that. But this Midwest family retreat, that there's 40 couples here supporting each other, really trying to learn how to raise their kids together. It's amazing. We did not have this, and my husband and I were so scared about having kids on the East Coast because we didn't know where we were going to raise them. So this is really special and unique, and I thank God that He moved us here. And you know, I always think there's things we can do to work on and support each other, but I just think that, you know, thank God for what you have, because it's really beautiful. So sorry, I'm getting emotional, but just want to say that.
That's cool. Good. I think a church, we got to remember that our church is a reflection of us individually, and how many of us feel like we're perfect or where we've always wanted to be spiritually. I mean, we're just a work in progress, right? So, you know, God bless you, Monica, for just standing up and saying, hey, this is an area of growth that we can work on, you guys. And I hope that everybody will receive it that way and say, yeah, let's do it. You know, Monica's got an idea. Let's work on this. Let's make our community a community of love and nurture and support. That's what it's all about. Others? Anybody else?
I just wanted to say, Monica, to bring that back to your question and what we said originally, how can the church help you? I think that for anybody who feels like that or some other concern that you have, a place to start is to say, well, when have I had a need that I didn't feel supported, for example? And then those are kind of the areas that you want to hone in on and try to figure out what we can do to change it. Or maybe, you know, if somebody does say, like, you know, my kid doesn't find the church relevant, you know, well, then what can I do, or what can the church support me to do to help? You know, whatever it is, whatever you feel that is lacking, I think that's the part where you want to start with, and then say, okay, so how can the church come alongside us? How can the church equip and you know, help us to empower? There you go. Thanks. Mine. Yeah. How can the church equip and empower us to do that? That's what we want to start thinking about as we go through the rest of the talks, and as we leave here and go back, you know, to your messy life that you lead every day.
There's just a few minutes left, and I wanted just to ask you guys, in the spirit of community, if we could just take a moment and share with each other. If any of you have tried a Christian practice at home for your kids, if you could share that with us, let us know what you're trying and let us know how it's worked. How have your kids received it? And I guess Debbie and I could start. We could like throw out an example of what I'm talking. I heard somebody talk about like washing the car, and Debbie and I started something maybe a year and a half or 2 years ago, where we really felt like the kids are not engaging in family prayer enough, and we thought, what if every time we sit together for dinner as a family, we, at the end of our meal together, before we get up and do the dishes and all that stuff, or go our separate ways, what if we ask everybody to go around the table, take a turn, and say a thank you prayer. A thank you for what God has done for them, him or her today. And to share a Bible verse. And it's something that we've enjoyed, and it hasn't always worked perfectly. Like sometimes it's met with resistance, but I think we felt like, you know, we've given it a shot, and it's worked pretty well for us. And we're at a point now to be really candid with you, where we feel like we might need to tweak it a little bit because we feel like our oldest is kind of finding excuses not to come to dinner because she's starting to feel like this is something that's being imposed on me. She's in that stage of kind of freedom and so now we're like, okay, we need to mix it up a little bit. We need to get a little bit more creative and try to interject a little bit of variety. So do you guys have anything you'd like to share? Like what has worked for you? What have you tried? We'd love to learn from everybody.
Well, like everyone else, probably we pray with our children in the morning and at night, and there's always a Bible reading. One of the things we do in the morning is we wake them up with this rise and shine and give God. So it's kind of a gentler way. Sorry, pardon my voice. I don't have a great voice. Yeah. No. Well, it depends. We pray whenever we're going, and when we get in the car, we pray. We go around praying. But prayer could be talking, but a lot of times, like before eating, if one of the children wants to sing a song, what is that one that Anna likes to sing? Anyway, that's totally okay. And of course, the Lord is good to me. Okay. Anyway, there's a lot of conversation during the day about God, and I'm sure most people are doing that. So
just 1 second. The kids got so attached to reading the Bible before they go to bed that I think I was wrong doing this, but one day they were so naughty at night that I told them, because you are naughty, you're going to bed without a Bible story. And they really, really didn't like it. So, I'm sorry, Father James.
For those of you that have younger kids, we have this thing called the Action Bible. So it's pretty much illustrated like a comic book. And Christian has already read through the entire thing twice, and they love reading it. And if it's too late, I might tell them it's too late to read, and they'll be very upset at me. So, just a suggestion.
I think that Bible is good for adults. Yep.
Absolutely. There are stories in there I never understood until I read them in the comic strip format.
There's a Bible that we use at home called the Jesus Storybook Bible, and it's awesome. And I also learned a lot about it, and just makes the whole story of God and his relationship with us into one long love story. So it's really beautiful, and our daughter loves it, especially Goliath.
Okay, I learned this actually from Pope Tawadros. He was telling us a trick, very easy to do. Proverbs. There are 30 chapters of Proverbs, and I implemented this idea with my kids. Like, let's say today is December, December 5th? So we would open chapter 5 of Proverbs today and we'll read from it. And one of my kids, he'd like to pick up just the next number of the verse number 5 in chapter 5, like chapter 5 verse 6. This is how he connect what to do every day, and he make his verse collection in a box, so that he would say, this is my box verse collection, and he had all his verses collected in that box from Proverbs.
Really nice idea. Thank you. Thank you.
We have a book. It's an ABC Bible verses, so I try to do this daily, but it doesn't always happen. But we'll read a Bible verse, and I'll tell the kids to try to live that Bible verse. Like, a soft answer turns away wrath. My kids are loud. So I tell them, try to keep it, quiet, and try to live that verse. And then after school, we'll talk about it and see if they had the opportunity, to do something, or honor your father and your mother. We do that a lot. We go through that verse a lot. How can we do it? And, so I try to do it, but it's helpful, I think.
Really good. Others?
So my kids are a little older, I guess. So what we do is at the first day of every month, we pick a topic that they're going to work on, and it's either something that they read in the Bible that night or something they've been thinking about. And, you know, I mean, I guess it's similar to the ABC Bible verse, but we try to meditate on it in the evenings, like whatever, with our Bible reading or with our prayer. And I ask them to really pray about it, because what it's done is it's helped me show them that these things, no one is ever perfect, and that they really need to pray for God's help to work on each of these items. And it's okay if we repeat it. Sometimes, you know, on the first of the next month, we're like, yeah, maybe we need to keep working on that same topic. So it's just another way to talk about it and help them practice what they're reading.
Thank you guys very much for your patience and attention. And I know a Friday night is not the easiest time to come and stay focused, but by God's grace, you did it. Pat yourselves on the back. We've got a session in the morning and a session in the afternoon coming up tomorrow. Tomorrow we'll be talking about raising up children like God raises us, and family faith plans. We also want to encourage you tonight to unwind and enjoy each other's company and spend some time in fellowship. And remember that a church is made up of community. If you all have any questions at all, don't hesitate to reach out to my father's Father James and Father Theodore and Dr. Atif, and I'm also available, and we'll look forward to sharing a really nice time for the rest of these days.
What? No, I just want to say also Debbie and Feriel are available.
My bad.
Really quick before the kids come back, which they should be here in like 15 minutes.